My daughter told me she couldn't stay for my heart surgery because of an urgent work trip. 3 days later, while recovering alone in the ICU, I saw her Instagram story from SeaWorld with her kids, laughing and eating cotton candy. Before we start, don't forget to like this video, comment where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. Have you experienced something like this? Please let me know in the comments. My name is Anna. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how I saw my daughter's true face during my most difficult moment. Everything started 3 weeks ago here in Miami, Florida. My doctor, Dr. Richardson, had told me that the heart surgery I'd been postponing for so long could no longer wait. The coronary artery blockage had reached serious proportions and immediate intervention was necessary. He had spoken with the gravity that only comes when a medical professional knows that life hangs in the balance, explaining that this surgery was vital and that waiting any longer would pose significant risks to my survival. I immediately called my daughter Sarah, who was 35 years old, married with 2 children, and lived in the same city of Miami, just 45 minutes away from me. When I told her that the doctor wanted to perform the surgery the following week, there was an uncomfortable silence on the phone before she responded that the timing was very sudden and that she was extremely busy that particular week. My heart sank when she explained that she had a company conference and needed to travel to Chicago for a very important project presentation that could potentially bring in the company's biggest client, something she had been working toward for 2 years. I asked if she could possibly postpone the conference, but she emphasized that this was her career and that the opportunity was too important to miss. When I pressed about being there after the surgery, she assured me that she would absolutely be by my side afterward. But that particular week was simply impossible for her to be available. That night, I couldn't sleep as I grappled with the reality that my only daughter wouldn't be there during the most critical moment of my life, though I tried to rationalize that perhaps she was right about career priorities, and that projects sometimes cannot be postponed. When the surgery day arrived on that Tuesday morning, I went to the hospital early and Sarah came to see me, though she seemed to be in a hurry. She apologized profusely, explaining that her flight was leaving in 3 hours and she hadn't even finished packing her luggage. As I lay in the hospital bed, she held my hand and promised that she would be thinking of me throughout the surgery and that visiting me would be the first thing she would do when she returned. When I asked when she would be back, she told me Sunday evening since the conference would last 5 days. I was taken into surgery at 2 p.m., and the last thing I saw before the anesthesia took effect was the smiling face of Nurse Linda, who reassured me that Dr. Richardson was an excellent surgeon and that I would be reunited with my daughter in just a few hours. I closed my eyes thinking that my daughter was in Chicago, attending her important business conference. When I opened my eyes at 7:30 p.m., I found myself in intensive care with pain in my chest and a tube in my throat, while Nurse Linda stood beside me explaining that the surgery had been successful and that I needed to rest. When I asked about my daughter, Linda informed me that no one had come yet, though visiting hours would end at 9 p.m. I explained that my daughter was in Chicago at a conference, and Linda nodded understandingly, saying that she would surely come the next day. The first night was terrible, filled with pain, difficulty breathing, and the constant sound of monitors, but most of all, overwhelming loneliness. In a city where I had lived for 40 years, in a place where my only daughter lived just 45 minutes away, I was completely alone. The next morning I tried calling Sarah, but she didn't answer, and I convinced myself that she must be busy with conference activities. The second day was slightly better physically, but I remained alone with no word from Sarah. I sent her a message saying that the surgery had gone well and I was recovering, and her response came that evening expressing happiness about the good news but explaining that the conference was very intensive and she couldn't message in the evenings, promising we would talk soon with a heart emoji. The third day was Wednesday, and I was feeling somewhat better as Nurse Linda had given me permission to use my phone. She suggested that getting some fresh air would be good for me, and offered to take me to the garden in a wheelchair. While sitting in the garden, I decided to pass time with my phone and opened Sarah's Instagram, wanting to see photos from her conference in Chicago. When I opened her latest story, my world collapsed around me. Sarah was at SeaWorld, specifically the SeaWorld in Miami area. In the photo, she was laughing with her children Jacob and Emma, with an orca show visible in the background. Jacob was eating cotton candy while Emma wore a pink SeaWorld t-shirt. The timestamp showed today, Wednesday, and the location was listed as SeaWorld Orlando, which was only 4 hours away from Miami. I began trembling as I whispered that this couldn't be possible, but when I checked her other photos, I discovered a story from yesterday, Tuesday, showing a wonderful day at Disney World with the children wearing Mickey Mouse ears. There was even a post from Monday declaring that their Florida vacation was beginning, and the children were very excited. My surgery day had been Tuesday, which meant that instead of traveling to Chicago, she had been on a Florida vacation. With shaking hands, I opened WhatsApp and checked Sarah's location, discovering that location sharing was enabled and showed her current position as Orlando, Florida. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My daughter had lied to me and chosen not to be by my side during my heart surgery, the most critical moment of my life, fabricating an elaborate story about a business trip. Nurse Linda approached me, noting that I looked very pale and asking if I was all right. I told her with a trembling voice that I needed to speak with my daughter, and when Linda offered to call her, I declined, saying I needed to speak with her face to face. That evening I called Sarah, but she didn't answer, so I sent a message stating that she needed to call me urgently. At 9 p.m. she finally called, apologizing for not being available earlier and explaining that the conference was very intensive, and she had only just found an opportunity to make a phone call. When I quietly asked her where she was, she repeated that she was in Chicago as she had told me. I asked which hotel she was staying at, and she quickly responded with the Palmer House Hilton, asking why I was inquiring. When I told her that she was actually in Orlando, there was a long silence on the phone. She stammered, asking what I meant, and I explained that I had seen her Instagram stories showing her at SeaWorld with the children on their vacation. After an even longer silence, she began to stammer an explanation, but I cut her off, telling her that she had lied to me and chosen not to be by my side during my heart surgery. When she pleaded with me to understand, I asked what exactly I was supposed to understand, that she had left me to die alone. She told me not to be dramatic since the surgery had been successful, but I pointed out that this was merely chance and that I could have died. Her response was that I hadn't died, and that this vacation had been very important for the children who had been looking forward to it all year. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking so violently that Nurse Linda rushed to my side to see what had happened. When I tearfully explained the situation, Linda's expression changed from anger to shock as she declared that such behavior from family was absolutely unacceptable and not something she would ever expect from a loved one. I couldn't sleep at all that night, not just because of the physical pain but because of the ache in my heart. The next morning I called my lawyer James, telling him that I wanted to change my will. When he advised me not to make hasty decisions so soon after surgery, I explained that my daughter had abandoned me during surgery for a Florida vacation, and that this was not a hasty decision but a calculated one based on her revealed character. I told James that I wanted to leave everything to charity with not a single penny going to Sarah, and when he questioned whether I was certain about such a major change, I replied that I had never been more certain about anything in my life. James came to the hospital that afternoon, and I signed the new will, completely removing Sarah's inheritance rights. When Friday arrived, Sarah came to visit me, still bearing the tan from her Florida vacation, and looking every bit like someone who had just returned from a leisurely trip. She claimed that she had come immediately after returning from Chicago, but I simply stated that she had been in Orlando. Her face flushed red as she tried to make excuses, but I interrupted her, explaining that I was her mother who had raised her for 35 years, meeting every need she had ever had, and yet she had abandoned me during my most vulnerable moment. When she tried to use the children as justification, I firmly told her that children were not an excuse and that she had been my daughter long before she became a mother. She asked what I wanted her to do, pointing out that she couldn't change the past, and I agreed that she was right but that I could change the future. When she asked what I meant, I told her that I had changed my will and was leaving her nothing. She was shocked, insisting that I couldn't do such a thing, but I informed her that it was already done, signed and notarized. When she protested that she was my daughter, I replied that the day she forgot about me while going on vacation to Florida was the day I decided to forget about her as well. From that day forward, Sarah began coming every day, apologizing, crying, and pleading with me to forgive her, insisting that she wasn't really a bad person. I told her that I hadn't stopped loving her, but I had stopped trusting her, and when she asked how she could regain my trust, I explained that some things once broken can never be the same again. Over the following weeks, Sarah tried different tactics, bringing flowers and cooking my favorite foods, which I ignored, explaining that cookies couldn't restore trust. She brought her husband David to plead her case, but I reminded him that he had been present during the vacation and had chosen not to question the implausibility of Sarah's story about my surgery conflicting with her work trip. Sarah even suggested family therapy, but I pointed out that therapists cannot turn back time, and therefore cannot solve our problem. The most heartbreaking moment came when Sarah brought the children, Jacob and Emma, who had been crying and were told by their mother that I no longer loved them. I hugged them tightly, explaining that I loved them very much but had problems with their mother because she had lied to me, and that lying was a very bad thing. 7-year-old Emma held my hand and promised she would never lie to me, asking if I couldn't forgive her mother. But I had to explain that the adult world was complicated, and she should just focus on being a good girl. The pressure campaign continued with calls from Sarah's friends, her former teacher, her mother-in-law, and even her work colleagues, all trying to convince me to forgive her. To each of them, I posed the same question. Would they have left their own mother alone during heart surgery for a vacation? The answer was always no, which made my point clear. The final confrontation came during the 10th week when Sarah arrived angry rather than apologetic, demanding to know what more I wanted from her since she had made a mistake and apologized. I calmly explained that I wanted nothing from her. She had left, and I had simply accepted that our relationship was over. When she accused me of being cruel and asked what this harshness had gained me, I told her it had brought me peace, genuine peace for the first time in my life. She asked if I didn't care that the children would grow up without their grandmother, and I reminded her that she hadn't cared that I might not survive surgery. As Sarah left for the final time, she turned and told me that I would regret this decision someday. I responded calmly that she would be the one with regrets, because I was alive and had forgiven her, but I would never forget what she had chosen to prioritize over her mother's life. Today, 3 months after my heart surgery, I feel better than I ever have, not just physically but emotionally. I no longer have to trust anyone or worry about being disappointed by those closest to me. Sarah taught me life's greatest lesson. How people behave when you need them most reveals their true character. She chose Disney World and I chose my own peace of mind, a decision I have never regretted for a single moment. What would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven someone who abandoned you during the most critical moment of your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about the importance of trust in family relationships.